We're going to talk about air travel and
Yes.
the sustainability of air travel. Just a couple of months ago, Worth did an investigation. I asked the question, can air travel ever be sustainable? And we did a pretty thoughtful piece and sort of came to the conclusion that there's a lot of interesting things going on, but probably not anytime soon. And then I was on a United flight, and I see the little in-flight video, and Oscar the Grouch is promising to fly the plane with banana peels, powered by banana peels. And you've studied this. You're an expert. What is the truth here? What's the state of what's the truth?
Well, so first of all, Oscar the Grouch is pretty amazing, and I wish he was a spokesperson for EDF, So notwithstanding that and the claims about banana peels fueling our jets in the future, this is a big moment on the future of aviation. You might not know that the global aviation industry, if it was compared alongside countries, would be the 6th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So it's pretty ginormous. And it's a sector that's projected to grow in scope and scale. So it's not on its way down, it's on its way up. And we're at a turning point, sort of a transformation moment in the world of jet fuels. So moving from fossil-based into these alternative, or what we call sustainable aviation fuels, as you mentioned. And it is possible, and sort of the bright line that we draw at EDF is to shift to fuels that reduce greenhouse gases by 50%. So a significant cut. And that is within reach. Now, it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take time. To put this in perspective, less than 1% of jet fuel right now is sustainable aviation fuel. So there's like a 99% plus market opportunity on the table, right? This is a big deal. And there's economic opportunity, as well as really important and urgent opportunity on solving the climate crisis. There are startups getting in the game. So last month in the state of Washington, a startup called 12 is looking to build out sustainable aviation fuels. They just broke ground on a facility there. There's a big difference in some of the approaches that are used to basically create the sustainable aviation fuel. And that's really where the most important work needs to happen right now, is sussing out how is a fuel created, and then what is the climate impact of that creation process. Some could be, that are promising, could be using cooking oil. Was that me?
I doubt it.
It could be using cooking oil. And cooking oil has a lot of promise in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the sector, but there are really tricky issues around biofuels, in particular from agriculture. So if you look at some biofuels, they could cause more deforestation, and we need our trees in the ground. We need our trees in the ground to protect the climate. So really understanding what's at the source is key to understanding the potential for a certain kind of sustainable aviation fuel to actually credibly be sustainable. Who flew here to get to New York Climate Week?
Look at all the brave people.
Who saw that ad with Oscar? Or some version of that, yeah. There's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of hype. This is the opportunity for us to turn that hype into legitimate, credible business opportunity and climate opportunity.
So what is the key question? I imagine there are some processes where it takes more energy to create the fuel and therefore has more emissions, a total emissions footprint than the actual energy capacity of the fuel itself when you're done?
Yeah, so I think Mike actually, he said this better than I will. He was sort of laying out the big transformation that's been happening that is allowing the production of what's called e-fuels, which are electrochemical processes, basically taking carbon dioxide from industrial processes or from the air, and you add in hydrogen from water. And how you get that hydrogen is a whole other conversation that we could spend a day on, because a lot of the hydrogen that's developed now, 99%, it's an interesting comparator to the sustainable aviation fuel, is derived from fossil fuels. So getting it all the way back into the sort of the starting point of what's clean, what's green, and how you use those electrons to create what's clean and what's green into the end product that is then used to fuel planes is really important.
So I know the IRA has some money for transitioning the airline industry and investing in SAFs. Is it enough? Is it going to? How do you see that playing out? Is it going to move the needle?
Yeah. So this is why I said this is the moment to be paying attention. And it comes down to the tax credit in the Inflation Reduction Act, aka IRA. So in IRA, there's a clear provision that lays out massive tax incentives for the manufacturing of sustainable aviation fuels with a domestic product component to it, so largely in the US. This is an opportunity and this is a whole new business basically being built right now, right? We don't have sustainable aviation fuels at scale. We need to build towards that, and the American taxpayer is going to help cover the cost of that opportunity. And so getting this right, ensuring that how that tax credit is met and the companies that are able to access that tax credit have a credible and legitimate business strategy on climate is really where the game is now. And the Treasury Department hasn't issued its guidance yet. It'll be coming out in the next couple months. And you better believe that EDF and partner organizations are knocking on their door with airlines and others and companies asking for a really clear interpretation of how that tax credit's going to be used to uplift the economic opportunity and really uplift the climate benefit.
I think it's a fascinating point because I think a lot of people think, well, the money was allocated, the bill passed, and now we're in that process where everybody goes on and moves on with their life. But this is where we have to decide how the money's really going to get spent, who's going to get it, and you're obviously lobbying and making your case. But I think most consumers think this was asked and answered already.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you said that because somebody recently said to me, "Don't you love everything the Biden administration is doing on IRA right now?" And I kind of looked at them. I'm like, we are fighting every day to make sure the interpretation of that massive investment package that Congress passed is done in the right way. There are some serious potential differences of pathways that will play out, whether it's on sustainable aviation fuels or hydrogen development, or there's a whole series of things that are built into that bill. So getting the guidance right is sort of a make or break opportunity. And on sustainable aviation fuels in particular, hydrogen as well, the US signal is a really important signal to the world. And so in the next couple months, a bunch of these guidance documents are going to be coming out. Companies are going to be accessing the credits, which we're very supportive of, if they're done right. And that way, we can ensure that the investment by the American people is actually delivering that outcome. Yeah, this is the moment. So if you have an interest here to ensure the climate outcomes, this is your time to get your voice heard.
And how should the people in the audience go about doing that?
Yeah, you can contact me or my colleague Amy, who's somewhere in the crowd, to help with that. She's back there. We want to be helpful. So, get in touch with EDF or other environmental organizations. There's a big set of collaborating partners around these things. You could contact your local elected official and ask them to weigh in. This is the moment. The next few months are critical.
I'm sure you don't want to throw any individual airline under the bus because you have to work with these airlines. You need their buy-in and participation. But is there variation amongst different airlines? Do they sort of speak with one voice? Are they taking one approach, or is there a mixed bag?
Well, there's always a mixed bag, isn't there? Life is a mixed bag. So it's true that there are some airlines that are really leaning in and trying to do the right thing. There are others that are lagging, and this is true from a U.S. standpoint, but also globally. And then there's the trade associations, which sometimes carry a slightly different, more challenging message for us in the political context. EDF is co-lead with the Rocky Mountain Institute of a collaboration called the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance. And SABA was designed to basically organize a common point of view amongst the NGO community, leading airlines and leading companies, And last week, together, we put out a framework for how you would judge a sustainable aviation fuel in the marketplace, which will allow for basically en bloc purchasing of procurement policies, so that will create some pulling mechanism from the buyers into the market about here's the signal of what good looks like for us. So that's a really important framework. United Airlines is a part of SABA, as are JetBlue and Alaska Airlines, and I think Amazon Air and others.
So one of the things, a relatively recent development in sort of booking air travel, is that most flights now come with like estimated carbon emissions that you can sort of sort by flights and see what the actual emissions are. They're just big numbers. Nobody knows what they really mean, but you can compare, like this flight is going to be more efficient than this one. I will admit I have never changed my flight because of the carbon emissions. I suspect most of you haven't either. But have you got any sense of like whether or not that's actually changing consumer behavior?
I don't think we've seen a signal that is changing consumer behavior yet. I do think that there is power in individuals knowing what is happening. I think that creates not just an educational opportunity, but it creates the space by which a conversation can happen of like, are there alternatives and choices? And as sustainable aviation fuels, like we want this to succeed as they start to come online, those profiles will start showing dramatic differences. So I think it's actually a good thing that transparency is available. And I think it's also, there are choices not just in, do you offset your emissions or not offset because of it, but you might choose to like be in economy plus rather than in business class. And you might feel good about that. Or you might look at it and say, I'm going to actually take the Amtrak instead of getting in a plane to travel between here and DC or whatever, because those are real choices too.
Yeah, I think that actually would be fascinating, as if you're not just comparing against different flights and different seats, which they do, but comparing, having Amtrak loaded in as like, yes, it'll take you this much time compared to the flight, and this is what your carbon footprint will be compared to the flight. I just think making people aware of the true cost of their decisions is just a fascinating thing that's unevenly distributed at this point. Yeah,
I agree with that and appreciate it. And I struggle with this. I live in DC, and it's like, do I toggle between the train or the plane? One of the things that is really important to call out on this, that's in the Inflation Reduction Act, is it was the first real U.S. policy framework where the carbon intensity became the judge. So it's technology neutral. It doesn't say we're going to choose this company or this pathway. But for things like sustainable aviation fuels and hydrogen production and other solutions that are being promoted, it really looks at like what is the carbon intensity of that possible answer, and the tax credit keys off of that variable. That is an important shift, and in the European context, that shift has also been really successful, moving from just a belief that path A is better than path B to a much more sort of analytical and allows innovation to create different outcomes based on that carbon intensity.
Because ultimately, if that's the gauge, then it should theoretically remove the politicization of like, my friend runs a hydrogen processing factory, and therefore the hydrogen factory is going to get the subsidy and not the solar factory. That's right.
It puts all of the ideas on a level playing field. Yeah.
So are there any changes to the airline industry that you'd like to see, that you're advocating for, that would sort of steer it towards the right path?
Well, number one is we want the airlines in a position of support on getting the tax credit right. Like, this is the pivotal moment. So, our partners and our engagements is currently focused right now on at least in the U.S. context, let's make sure we get that right. And we also have this same conversation going on outside of the U.S. and with partners. And there's an organization called the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, which is basically the UN body that oversees global aviation. And they set a hard-fought standard a couple years ago. And that standard should be imported into basically what we're doing in the U.S. And that's the pathway we're on, but it's hanging in the political balance. There are attempts by Congress to push legislation that would upend the very carefully crafted provisions in IRA. So that's thing one, is like the policy advocacy is so important. I think thing two is continuing to adopt and build out the frameworks that we and others are developing of like, here's what good looks like, and the procurement around that, and enabling and taking advantage of the incentives that will enable them economically to build more sustainable aviation fuel into their fuel profile, which will create a bigger market opportunity in the end.
So one of the things we talked about last week, I think, was that we're in the midst of this massive energy transition. It's affecting the airline industry, but it's affecting the entire economy as we move to clean energy sources. And you called it the messy middle, where there are tough choices to be made, the time for speeches is over, and now we have to make decisions about where we spend money, what our strategies are, what's going to scale and what's not. Can you just elaborate a little bit about where you see us in this process?
Yeah, we live in the messy middle, my friends. We are in the messy middle. There are no perfect answers to the problems that we face. There aren't. There is a lot of need to get a common understanding of what good looks like, which requires science, it requires thoughtful design, and then build the incentives and the enabling conditions and the policies and the partnerships that are going to make those pathways the most effective pathways, right? That's where we are. And so the messy middle is sort of a concept that we embrace at EDF, but it's a really hard place to be, because environmental advocacy has typically been very much on the like, there's a good answer and there's a bad answer. And now we're in the messy middle of trying to navigate the trade-offs of what good looks like and how do we get there and how do we power that change process that's going to have the most impact and deliver those results as soon as possible, because we're running out of time.
Excellent. Well, I think one of the things that separates EDF from a lot of other groups is that you have pursued a pragmatic approach in a variety of different situations, and I want to thank you for the work you do. We're glad that you're going to be fighting for the IRA allocations to be properly aligned, even if I barely understand how it works.
Thank you, Dan. And we're happy to provide some information through Worth and through Taconomy of like, how does this end? Where do these tax credits come down at the end of the day? We'll have more to say about that soon.
Fantastic. Amanda, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.